What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team. Rhomas Men's Team back in action. Mr. Rob, what's going on, brother?
Nothing much, man. How are you doing?
Good. We have a really interesting, well, I find an interesting topic today. You and I have recently discussed some, what would you call them, like female dynamics and dating a particular female, and the chaos that can come up, and how do you navigate it? So I'll let you take the lead on this one, if you don't mind me saying that, and we can dig into it, because I think the guys would benefit a lot from it. I'll also bring some random dudes up on here. I can't find Ray. I'm not sure if he's here.
I think I see him at the bottom of the chat.
Okay. Oh yeah, there we go. Let's bring him on. And I'll invite some of you guys up here. Don't feel obligated to come on if you don't feel comfortable. No sweat. I see some new faces here as well. So don't feel obligated, but we'd love to have you on to get your opinion on too. So Rob, I'll let you take the lead on this one. Set the stage, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've all experienced dating woes. I'm sure Ray as well. But there's just been recent situations with a lot of friends that I've noticed there are a lot of guys kind of going through it, trying to interpret, how these girls are thinking. And I think it creates a divide between the genders. So I think it would be a good topic to talk about. I mean, is there anything in specific?
Yeah, well, I think a really interesting dynamic is when you start dating someone and then you get to know them a little more, and then you discover that they have a certain amount of trauma. Which, by the way, we all do. This is not a judgmental thing at all. It's an objective, like functional versus dysfunctional, and trying to understand whether or not it's a go or no go. So you and I have a mutual buddy, started dating someone. They get somewhat serious, and the female then tells him that she basically has a troubled past. And starts to push him away, etc. So that's sort of the setting of the stage. I guess, what do you guys think when you first start dating someone and then you cross over the chasm of like, oh, they actually have baggage too? How do you decide on whether or not to pursue that, and what framework would you use to help make that decision?
Well, dude, I mean, honestly, you've helped me a lot with this. I think a very important step, and hey, it might push somebody away. And if it does, then it probably wasn't the healthiest potential relationship, or it was going to take a lot of work. So at least right out of the gates what you're dealing with. But I think when you asked me to ask someone, what did they want? What are their green flags? What are their red flags? What are they willing to work on? What are they not willing to work on? Like, what's deal breakers? Like, what do you want to do in a relationship? What do you want with your family? If all that aligns, I feel like that's a really good way to start a relationship. And what I've noticed is, even me being single and trying to date myself, girls really respect that conversation. But I do think that if you get too in depth, or you do go down an avenue where it's like, now you have a judgment-free policy, you can tell me anything, and then maybe they tell you something, and that could potentially change the dynamic of the relationship, because now they've potentially said something that they weren't ready to say, or they weren't prepared enough to deal with some of the ramifications of potentially trauma they've experienced. I hold on to some of those stories.
I wonder, Ray, if there is a point where you say, hey, you can tell me anything, but then if they tell you, for instance, oh, well, I've got 20 bodies buried in the backyard, where you do say, okay, well, hey, I'm not judging you, but from a functional standpoint, like, I can't go to jail right now. So, Ray,
not right now, not today.
Yeah.
Yeah. She tells you that there are 20 bodies buried. in the backyard. Am I the only one who gets hard at that idea? But seriously, folks, Rob nailed it. It's like just communication, right? And like create an environment where open communication is not punished, right? And so, Wes, wouldn't you like to know if your romantic partner is a serial killer? Like, create the environment where they can tell you, and then you're either trapped in that relationship, in order to protect your own life, or you can exit. I think that something I've tried is by starting, if you want to find out all the traumas and flaws and baggage that your partner has and that you're going to have to navigate, maybe you start by explaining your own baggage, and like say, for example, I mean, I just got out of a long relationship, and one of the things that was a trigger for me was anytime she would say, talk about money, or like, oh, you're not making enough money, or don't you want to protect your family, or so, just to let you know, when you question the way I spend money, it's kind of a trigger for me. Thank you for understanding. And then, are there any triggers for you that I should know about, like stuff in your last relationship that really pissed you off? So, for example, a conversation like that can create an open dialogue where you have advance notice on the kind of things that trigger your romantic partner. When we're 17, 18, 19, and for example, I was 17, 18, 19, and I didn't ask these questions. I started a 24-year relationship when I was 22 years old, and I wasn't in tune with those things inside of myself, first of all, right? So I'm reluctant to blame the other person, but knowing what you want, knowing what triggers you, explaining what triggers you, and asking them what triggers them, like that's a way of opening up that conversation. And again, like try to create the conditions that it doesn't get punished, but it gets kind of like it's a good thing to have these kind of conversations.
If you decide to then walk away because of the 20 bodies in the backyard, what if that person interprets that as, hey, you said you would not punish me, but now you're leaving?
Well, I suppose I'm now just thinking this through in real time. Like the earlier in the relationship you have these conversations, the better. Right? Like, so that you're not already in a legal contract of marriage when you have this conversation. I mean, it makes it easier. Keeping expectations in check. And there's all kinds of language that young men can use these days. There is a hookup, and then it transitions into a situationship. That's a real term now. And then it transitions into a relationship. So if you can have these interesting conversations, now obviously, if you're hooking up with someone and you're like, tell me about your childhood traumas, like that might not be the right time and place for this kind of conversation. But like, if you can have these conversations sometime between hookup, situationship, and before a relationship, well, then I think it makes an exit a lot easier.
Do you Kaizen, when do you have those conversations? Is it a timeline thing, or is it on the emotional scale type of thing? When does one have those conversations?
I think one of the things that we're not really addressing a lot in using these terms is the context. So if this is a relationship that's like a week old or a month old, you're going to be approaching it differently, obviously, than something that's a year, 2 years, 20, 30 years. You know what I mean? So that's something that if it's a long-term relationship, you've had to kind of get to know this person. So you're probably communicating a lot better than somebody that's more in the newer stages. It's probably going to be dependent more on what you're trying to get. If you're dating somebody to just date and just to be around people, but with no like long-term goal, you're not trying to marry somebody or trying to build a family or whatever, then you're communicating with that person differently than if that's not your goal. And that's something there's I think it's 80% of all communication is nonverbal. So while the whole open communication, like the fad that people will say all the time, oh, you're not listening to me, you're not talking to me. Well, they're talking, but they're not just saying it in words. Sometimes it's the tonality, sometimes it's the underlying theme of what they're saying. Sometimes they might say one thing, but it's actually in reference to something else. And you kind of have to be the detective to kind of figure that out. Like they're complaining about this, but that's not the root cause of why their frustrations or whatever might arise from. So it's more trying to figure out how that person communicates first, like how they communicate, what they say, what it means, understanding that, and then diving into what the context of what that entails. If it's something that you're like, I'm going to be with this person and I can look past this kind of thing. Because there was an old one that Ray had brought up a while back where he's like the dishwasher is my partner loading the dishwasher worth divorce. Like I'm upset about that. Is that something that is going to ruin my life? Or is that something I can kind of just look past and be cool with? And then there's some things that, like if it's 20 bodies in the backyard, or maybe this person has some other things that you don't want to tolerate or you don't want in your life, and that's like a deal breaker. Figuring out that right away is, I mean, it's beneficial for you, and like you're not wasting your time in a relationship that's not going anywhere and it's not hitting your needs. And then it's also beneficial for that other person because you're not wasting their time and creating this false narrative of something that they think that you're trying to achieve or gain with that relationship.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And to get into the weeds here, Alex, if you're open to it, you put a comment and said, I've had some real bombs dropped on me, early during Pillow Talk. Are you open to sharing any of those, or at least the genre of what maybe those bombs were?
Yeah, I just mean like certain political views that were way different than what I was expecting, or maybe sexual things that I was kind of blown away by. But I honestly just think that if you create the right environment, even early on, you can get deep into it with people, and like certain things will just let people's guards drop.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I want to introduce a framework that I've used for quite a while, and I think it's helped me, which is like what I'm personally looking for is a love mate. Like that's kind of like the prerequisite, which is like, am I attracted to this person? And Jordan Peterson actually talks about this I know for that stupid thumbs up thing. Jordan Peterson talked about this. For a while, I was actually trying to convince myself that it's like, oh, that's an archaic biological system that I don't need. I don't need to be physically attracted to this person. Like I could be intellectually attracted to them, and that's sufficient for me. Turns out that's not sufficient for me. But anyway, love mate, then playmate. Like, can I hang out with this person? Right? Do we enjoy going to the farmer's market together, to the movies? Can I bring them out with my friends? Blah blah blah, etc. Then a mind mate, right? Like, can I intellectually joust with this person? So, and that's really important for my type of personality, being an NT in Myers-Briggs personality assessment. And then the fourth and final thing, and I think this is the hardest, which is a workmate. Okay, if we're about to enter into the longest term contract that we will ever have in our lifetime, can you actually do the work? And when I was having a conversation with Rob about our other friend, and this woman disclosed to our friend some pretty heavy trauma, it's not that, oh, I just think she's broken forever and always, and don't touch that, because we all have our own trauma and baggage. The question to him was, hey, man, just so you know, you are going to have to put a lot of work in with her, right? But whether it be through her individual counseling, your individual counseling, and couples counseling, et cetera. Number one, are you willing to do that? But number two, is she willing to do that? Does she even see that is an agenda item on the work list? And if the answer is no, right, then I would say, well, you really got to consider whether or not, like, yeah, you might have found a love mate and a playmate there, but is she really a workmate by her own voting? Rob, what's your perspective? Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Well, when you told me about that, those 4 mates, which I sometimes forget because it'd be easy enough, but they are important. And I think that's tough, man. I've been there myself. Like, okay, if this person is admitting they have potential issues and I am saying I'm willing to work with you because you do check all those boxes, I think potentially it could be riskier to not try to work on you with you, I should clarify, versus trying to find another you. And that is like you'd be surprised how unbattling it is. Like I've been in a situation where there was 2 girls I really liked, and like you have to compare, and like one of them potentially had what I would consider to be more trauma, but she checked other boxes. And then there was another girl who like had everything I need and wanted, but wasn't quite as good of a fit, but still a really great fit. And that can be pretty tough because I think, like you said, even if they acknowledge they need help, and even if they say like, oh, I don't deserve you, and they're already on that path of trying to get better, there's like no guarantee. At least that's what it feels like to me from my experiences. I'd be curious to know what other people think, but I have been with girls who I felt like had great qualities that are like what you would want to see in a potential mate, but had this just catastrophic, eject button type response that I didn't know if I would be able to help them get through, even though I was willing to help them get through. It seemed like there's a lot of sabotage that occurs, or a lot of abandonment issues where like, it's like, I'm just going to get out of here before I can. And it's like, you're trying to help this person, but it's extremely frustrating. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to know everyone's else take on that.
Yeah, Ray, how do you deal with, let's say in a scenario where, let's say, sabotage, very common pattern, in a relationship, it's often easier for you to sabotage the relationship because your brain thinks, well, there's going to be an inevitable end anyway. They're going to find out who I am anyway. So I'd rather control the eject button rather than randomly being ejected. Ray, what's your perspective on that particular pattern? And if let's say that the other person is doing these very common patterns and you kind of know the formula, is it your place to say, hey, I know what you're doing, I want to try to coach you right now, but that could bring about its own problems? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the kind of masculinity we're trying to practice in this group, Wes, is to be the grown-up and to be the mature party. And I can honestly tell you that I practice this, or I have practiced the sabotage technique most of my life, which is either consciously or unconsciously. If I have a job that I've lost interest in, that's usually after about 6 months, I will stop showing up, stop putting my best self forward. That's a form of sabotage to procure termination, right? To end the relationship. Same in romantic relationships, right? Like I see it in others, but surely I must have done it myself as well, right? It's a form of conflict avoidance. That's what comes to mind for me. Sabotage, self-sabotage, and sabotaging a relationship in order to procure the result of termination because the relationship is not working. And so there are uncomfortable conversations that have to take place, that a grown-up and a mature person, the mature party, has to start in these kind of situations, rather than the lazy or fear-based strategy of sabotage. There are grown-up relationships that have to take place between romantic partners and between, employer, employee, or business colleagues. I like what you said earlier, Wes, where this is the most important and expensive and long-term, longest duration kind of relationship or agreement that we're going to get into in our lives. So I think these are important conversations for young men to have and consider, and something that comes to mind just globally in this conversation is don't rush in. Don't rush into marriage. Don't rush into a relationship. Have those grown-up conversations, those uncomfortable conversations first.
Yeah, Alex, you raised your hand, bud. What's your perspective on this?
I just like that Ray was like bringing it to ourselves. We've been talking about like a lot of like the work that other people need to do, and like how much work we should be putting into that. But that give and take of if they're helping me work on my own shit, like I'm much more likely to help them work on their shit. And like, I think that we just need to also think about ourselves too.
No, it's a great point. And to that end, I can't remember the last time somebody's told me, well, I don't really work that hard. You know, everybody says they work hard. Everybody says they put in the work. What is the work? Kaizen, in the context of a relationship, what do you think the work actually looks like? Is it part academic, like, hey, I'm reading the books, I'm going to the seminars, I'm doing the counseling, blah, blah, blah? Is it also part like real time, hand-to-hand combat? What is it?
I think it's like what Ray was kind of touching on. It's having those difficult conversations. The more that you do it, the easier they become. The more that you avoid it, the harder they become. And that's going to make whatever it is that you're trying to get, that's what the difference maker is going to be. So the more difficult conversations you can have together, there's a lot more stuff that you're going to be able to do, right? Versus if you're like avoiding, I don't want to offend this person, I don't want to bring this kind of thing up. And a lot of that is kind of touching into what Alex just said. It's also on you. It's how you handle the information that you get. And that's kind of, I've kind of seen that underlying theme within a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. Like if a girl says something to you and like drops a bomb on you or something like that, most of the time it's really just a guy being like, ew, gross. Gross, I can't believe you did that. You whore, just slut. That's gross.
Yeah.
And a girl's not going to do that to you. Like, that's not how that works. We're biologically different. We don't have the same kind of setups for that kind of thing. So if you want the open kind of communication, that is what we're talking about. That's a part of it. It's just being able to accept some of the stuff that you get told isn't going to be in your reality as far as like what you think is the way the world is. Sometimes you'll get shit that like, whoa, my perception of reality is completely different now. I did not know this was a possible thing. I didn't know people did this or had this kind of characteristic. So where the work comes in is you're figuring each other out, you're talking, you're having these communications, and you'll notice progress. So either you're going to be deeper as far as like your connection with this person, so you have more references like that you have together. There's more things or activities that you're building together. You'll notice the progress. If there's no progress, if you're at a stalemate or a plateau, or even the relationship is like dying, you're gonna be able to know. And it's more, are you lying to yourself? Are you saying, oh, I don't want to give up on this person when it's already like it's been dead? Or is it a situation where maybe it is something that you can keep working on? Is it a situation where you're being honest in, okay, am I running away from this just because it's kind of difficult and my brain doesn't understand how to be happy, and that's why I'm self-sabotaging? Is it something where I don't understand? I've never had this kind of neural pathway in my brain to understand how to handle these emotions. Stuff is going too good. I got to do something to fuck it up. And just kind of like taking all of those kind of things into consideration as far as like your mindfulness, taking a step back. Okay, this is what's going on. I think it can be hard sometimes, especially for men. Most men don't get this kind of stuff told to them, that we don't get it taught in school. Their media and all that's not going to say, as a man, you have no real reason to get married. You only would lose stuff from that, as like 50% of your shit and alimony, as you have no benefit to getting married as a man.
It's just like a figure.
Literally.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're like marrying Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, but as a guy, like, no, it's always negative. So that's something to take into consideration too. Is this relationship that I'm in, do I want to be married? Is that something that within the confines of what I define it as that I want? Is it something I don't want? Do I really just want like a relationship with somebody that I'm dating? I also have my own life outside of that. Do I want them involved in like my business life? And it's just person to person. What do you preference? What are you going to work on? And then take all that in. Okay, I'll go.
Yeah. Yeah. And Patty P is telling you to shut up because I believe he just got married. Arjuna, what's your perspective, my friend?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two two main variables to this, and the first one being like you have to be fulfilled with being by yourself, because like for me, I came from a whole string of codependent relationships because I came from like a fucked up mom. So I'm like, oh, I can fix these people. And then so out of the gate, I'm just projecting like this over idealism where I'm like, oh no, like if I put in enough of this effort, then we're gonna go right off into the sunset. But I'm not really being realistic towards how their incapability of showing up. And so I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing, like it seems pretty, like in my experience, it's been pretty clear at this point of just using nonviolent communication, which can be hard because there's a lot on the line and there's a lot of emotions, a lot of expectations on this other person. But to just be like you can feel when they're kind of heavying the presence of the experience, or if there's some sort of trauma or some sort of past thing that shows up and it's kind of weighing down and you're like, okay, this is uncomfortable. And then to be able to address it objectively and kind of see how they feel about it. And I do this with my girlfriend all the time because like she can initially be very reactive, but God bless her, she always circles back, always. And if she didn't, then I wouldn't be with her. And that's what I had to realize in past relationships where like if I'm vulnerably being like, look, I understand that you have this stuff, but when you do this, it makes me feel this way. And then if they can't be open in that moment, or if they can't circle back, then that cycle's never going to change. It's just not. And so like, unless it's getting addressed and then there's steps to be able to take to actually expand and grow together, then you're just being over idealistic. I mean, that happened in my last relationship where something happened so clearly and I'm like, this isn't going to work out. But at that point, I'm still was a person who had to like suffer through, things had to get so bad for me to leave. Right. So I was in the relationship for 6 extra months, knowing like there was very direct circumstances where like this is not going to work, and I still just fucking dragged myself through it. But like you don't have to do that at this point.
And yeah, Arjuna, part of what resonates with me is like when you use the codependency language. It's like I think back of all the times I said yes when I wanted to say no, right? Where it was like because I guess I was so afraid of being alone or being abandoned or rejected or whatever. I would just say yes and go along with so many things that I didn't want to do. And over time, and I kind of like I owed it to myself and to the other person to be honest and give the uncomfortable truth, right? Like back to those, like having those grown up, mature, uncomfortable conversations. Like it's just because when I said yes to stuff, and again, like it's like there's a compounding effect, right? If you say yes to all these different things, the relationship becomes this kind of prison of things that you don't want or don't like. And yeah, so that's some of the things that came to mind while listening to what you just said. And the importance of like the difficulty with being honest and the importance of being honest, because it might result in just you being by yourself, and that's okay.
Yeah, well, and I want to evolve the topic into what we hit on earlier, which is objectively defining the work, because I think this is a really important pattern with men and women. Just because you say you do work does not mean you're doing the work. And I think really easy framework for this is like, okay, what does this mean? So execution and education, I think both of those things are required to excel in life in a lot of areas, but especially relationships. Okay, are you executing on the current knowledge that you have, right? That you're only going to get so far if you're executing off of an old operating system. Okay, but are you also educating yourself? Now, I think if you have execution and no education, then you stay at the lowest rung of the ladder. I think if you have all education and no execution, then you stay, I don't know, as a professor in a university, right? Whatever. Like, you need to have both pragmatically, in my personal opinion. So I think in relationships, I'd like to put this on the table. What are the objective measures where you can point to and say, hey, I am doing the work? I'll throw the first one out there. And then rather than going fully around, just raise your hand if you're interested in the topic or have anything to add. So I personally believe like the objective work is number one, executing from, what do they say? What's the framework? I probably know. It's like, first you have unconscious incompetence, then it's brought to your attention that you now have unconscious or conscious incompetence, and then eventually you get to conscious competence. Like those are the 3 stages of sort of progress. But how do you take that from like an abstract, one-liner into objectionable action items? So in my opinion, if you're not reading books on relationships, I think you're massively missing out. Right? If you're not reading John Gottman, if you're not reading Esther Perel, et cetera, or Gary Keller, was it Gary Keller's 5 Love Languages? These are basic fundamentals that will give you dramatic paradigm shifts on how to interact in a relationship. If you're missing that education, then you are putting yourself at a very large probability of executing just the basics incorrectly. So my vote is objective work in a relationship. Number one, educate yourself from the top minds in the world on this topic. Tim is asking for book suggestions. 100% number one, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. The 5 Love Languages. I like Kaizen saying Psycho-Cybernetics. Awesome book. I actually have to reread that. Another groundbreaking book that I thought was like a big paradigm shift for me was Esther Perel's Mating in Captivity. Another fundamental one that I talk to Rob about this all the time, and Ray, Please Understand Me Too, which it's a personality book. But it's the operating system of humans. In my personal opinion, it's helped me dramatically. Kaizen saying Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I think I've never read that. I'll have to take a look. So number one, are you educating yourself academically? I think a lot of people are dismissive of that. Like, oh, you can't learn about relationships in a book. And my simple response is like, yes, you can. Number two, counseling, whether that be like personal coaching or counseling and or couples counseling. I highly recommend couples counseling. And then number 3, journaling, actually writing out the things. So getting it in your veins so you understand the actual patterns. And then number 4, the execution of the patterns inside of the relationship. Okay, there's a conflict that comes up. I'm going to use Gottman conflict model, right, to resolve this. You are going to stumble at it first. You are going to seem like a robot at first, but eventually it becomes your new way of being. Kaizen, let me throw it over to you. How could one objectively define the work in a relationship? Do you agree with what I just said? Would you edit it at all, et cetera?
I understand. So in reference to like what you mentioned, the levels of conscious competence, once beyond like you're conscious, you're aware that you're aware that you're aware, you become unconsciously competent. That would be like the next after doing the work. I would say a way to kind of gauge that would be one just example, like, do you emotionally react to certain things? Do you, like, if somebody slams a door, as an example, if somebody slams a door, do you freak the fuck out? Like, oh my God, what are you doing in here? If that is just as an example, I'm not saying you do or you don't. If that's your baseline, are you working towards being able to, something like that happens, are you staying calm? Are you able to think logically? Are you able to keep your emotions in control, to not freak out, to handle the situation better? Are you checking in with that and seeing where you're at, where you're like, okay, previously, if something like this were to happen, I would freak out. I've had people say something about that in the past where I freaked out. I'm noticing this happening now and I'm not. Am I building momentum this way, or am I building momentum the other way where I'm getting more volatile? Am I letting more cortisol in my body build up to where I'm more short-tempered, more things will set me off? I think in relation to doing the work, the only way to really do that is to expose yourself to it and to have these experiences, to get those in your life, your character attributes, and your video game character life, you're trying to max out that, and you're not going to get those points without actually going through the experiences, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, Patty P, given that Kaizen told you just made the worst decision of your life, what is your?
It's something. It's a new thing every week. Anyway, no.
It's like
So
there's now 21 bodies buried in the backyard. Yeah.
I've been calling 411 a lot. Or got to call the fucking dig or whatever. I don't know. I've been doing this thing called the Artist Way, and it's like a 12-week program that's all in this book by Julia Cameron. And I found it out because someone on my social media was like, "Hey, we're doing like this like kind of pod thing where they have like a free meeting. You can go. It's like every Tuesday night, 6:30 Central Time." And they meet and talk about it and then break off in like little pods and then meet and talk about like each chapter or whatever.
Love it.
But a big foundation of this, I mean, the whole point of it is like to rediscover your inner artist or whatever. It's called The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. Anyway, the big part of this book is this thing called the morning pages, and it's like you just get up and in the morning you write 3 pages of just free, like whatever. It's kind of like a subconscious dump. And so this is like my journal, which I started January 23, and it was like all sorts of just me just, figuring out how to like write in my journal, which was like pretty fucking hard. Like it's pretty spotty until this past February is when the program started. It's just all cream of like consciousness stuff. And then now I'm like, oh, now I understand journaling. It's not just like, hey, I did this, I did that. It's just like literally like throwing up all the fucking like nasty shit that's in your subconscious and then just going about your day. So that's like the long and short of it. And then each chapter is like a week, and then there's like different like activities they have you do, like, different journaling activities. I just bought my second little book and then another larger composition book. So I'm gonna use the smaller book for like the workshop stuff and then the big book. But anyway, last thing, I highly recommend the Rhodia. That's what I use as my journaling stuff because they also make, I don't know if you can see it. It's like a dot grid notebooks and shit. Pretty cool. But yeah, it turns out journaling, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's outstanding. So I think to go off of what Kaizen was saying to Trey, and Trey, thanks for coming up, man. I think I've invited you before and you were originally hesitant. So thanks for having the guts to come up here, brother. Meditation can slow the thoughts down. I think journaling helps you zoom in on the thoughts and like analyze, oh, this is the pattern. I mean, Patty, you could probably, relate to this. Oftentimes the monologue we have in our head is almost like a nervous tick. You don't even pay attention to it. Right? It's like biting your nails or like, fidgeting with your feet, etc. Until you actually start journaling. It's like, oh, that thought that I'm thinking is pretty messed up. Right? I've been thinking this since I was 4. I should probably consider changing that, So Trey, let me throw it over to you. You left a comment in the comment section. Maybe introduce it to the topic as the final topic for today's cast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for bringing me on. I've just since late last year, I've been on a kind of concerted path of trying to better myself and my situation. And partway through, I discovered this team that perfectly lined up with what I've been trying to do. And I have a long-term partner approaching a decade. And I guess as I've gone on this path, I've just seen the emotional or just kind of the opposite of the reaction I would hope for from the other partner. And so trying to navigate how to put a realistic timeline on, because I feel like I do acknowledge I'm throwing a huge change at her, and so I don't want to put an unrealistic timeline on things, but just it is kind of throwing a kink into my my mindset and how I'm approaching things.
You're thinking marriage?
So far, no marriage, just a long-term girlfriend.
Well, I'm saying, like, I'm sorry to interrupt, man. What are you trying to get from her? Like, into a marriage? What timeline for what?
A timeline for, I guess, digesting her mindset on all of this. So I know it's all a lot for her to take on at once, and so I don't want to put an unrealistic timeline on it and rush anything. So the approach I've been taking so far is just trying to give an honest feedback of how things affect me, and then just see kind of what she does with the information, and it's information that I haven't shared. I haven't been truthful with myself for a long time, and I'm in the process of getting a hold of it. And so just trying to, I guess now, figure out how to stay on path with kind of a negative thing in the background, feels like trying to pull me down.
Can Trey, let me know if I'm making this too simplistic or if my summary is completely off. Is what you're saying, hey, I have a long-term partner. I am now sort of on this path of progress, and my partner is giving me resistance towards that progress. Is that a rough summary?
Yeah, and it's kind of just, I feel like a knee-jerk response of, I think it boils down to the anxieties and fears that she might have surrounding the vacuum or the disparity of mindsets or progress.
Yeah,
I think we can all relate to that, dude. I think Wes, a couple of things that come to mind is and I presume, Trey, your partner is female?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Wes, a couple of things come to mind. We're men. They're women. Happiness is for women and children is something we say on this pod, right? We're different beasts. We have different lizard brains. We have different inputs, incentives, and needs. And so it is not unusual for the male and the female in the relationship to be on different kind of trajectories. And it's, in fact, this is why this kind of work we're talking about today is so important, because the default position is that biologically the man is going to have different needs at different ages than the woman. And so there's going to be, at different points, you're going to be fed up with the status quo. And so that's what comes to mind, Wes. It's it's something, and not to minimize it, but it's something I can identify with, is that my partner and I, or your partner and yourself, get fed up with the status quo at different times. Or one can consider the status quo okay, and the other one can be fed up with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think another body of work I'd highly recommend everybody look into is Robert Sapolsky out of Stanford University. He posts all of his lectures on YouTube. So my primitive understanding of this is, number one, all humans are social creatures. So the only reason we're here is because we relied on people around us to help us survive. So I think anytime we feel like we are starting to lose pace from the pack or from our leader, that naturally is going to bring up anxiety, and I'm not immune to this. Trey, you're probably not immune to this, et cetera. From my understanding from Robert Sapolsky's work, women have a higher level of oxytocin, which is a communal hormone. Testosterone is an independent hormone. So my understanding is women will feel this even more. Why? Because she's likely looking to you as her lifeline, right? Like you are in the driver's seat. Now you are going faster, right? And she feels like she doesn't have a seatbelt on, or the only seat, or like, so the model that I use for this is like, okay, for every unit of progress that I make, I need to 2 or 3x the units of reassurance for my partner. You know, add an extra seatbelt, verbally communicate like, hey, you know, I know this is going to change. I know I'm going to the gym more. I know I'm doing this and I know it's annoying and so on, but just know like you're still my ace, right? Like you are still like, we are partners in this. I am doing this for us because as you could probably imagine, like, let's reverse it. You know, imagine you are dating the most attractive female in the world and now she's going out, right? She's Taylor Swift and she's going out on tour. You probably don't feel great about that situation, probably, right? Or you're dating Taylor Swift before she becomes Taylor Swift, right? It's probably not a great situation to
Which
feel
means
like,
she
oh,
was
like,
13, but anyway, go ahead.
yeah. Right. I found the love of my life and now she's out jet setting across the world. Probably not going to make you feel too secure. So my personal belief on this is using those ratios, exaggerating on, like over indexing on the reassurance ratio so that for every unit of progress, you're giving multiple units of reassurance. Rob, what's your perspective?
I mean, honestly, dude, that's super sound and sage advice. There's something you told me before about like everyone's on a journey. And what I've realized is that I've noticed now where I am on my journey, and I can see where some other people are further along and some people are still trying to play catch up. And I think 100% you're spot on. I see people in relationships communicate with each other. And even though I'm single, I can see how ineffectively they're doing it because the guy doesn't understand where the woman's coming from. And I think that what you had said is paramount because people don't realize that there's a different perspective from the female brain. And if you don't understand that perspective, you'll never be happy, in my opinion, because I've been there, dude. It's like you just ram your head into a wall and it's not, you have to sit there, you have to listen, you have to address the concerns that they have, even if they aren't concerns that you have. And even if they might be considered illogical, that's just part of being a good partner is doing what it takes to keep the team together. And sometimes you got to pick your teammate up. And I think a lot of men don't realize sometimes that there's a plight between both genders. Like, yes, when you're with the guys and you're talking guy talk, yeah, you're going to have similar disagreements or similar situations that you can't understand where your wives are coming from. But as I get older and as I start to read more books and talk to you, and like, there was something I wanted to say to Alex, maybe at some point later. I know it's getting towards the end of the cast, but there are plenty of things you can do to improve. And part of it is reading, like the book that you told me to read by Dr. Gottman, and then some of the documentaries you told me to watch, and putting all that into perspective on how you can better yourself, but also better your ability to help others. Like it's pretty insane how confused I was even just like 6 months ago. And on this path of self-discovery, like there is a way out. So like anyone who is struggling, like there's a lot of good things that you can do and make tremendous progress for yourself, but also for your partner. It's just, I don't think you'll ever regret any of the time you spent working on yourself. So, I think that there's so much great advice in this men's group. Like even just being here is a start.
Yeah, I think, Trey, also another point is the more you educate yourself and the more you understand human patterns, they over time become, I would say, very predictable. So no different than, and I hate like the elementary analogy here, but it's like if you put a dog in a chaotic environment, don't blame the dog for barking, right? It's a dog being a dog. So the more patterns we understand, if we realize then that we're the ones flicking that domino and then we're blaming the last domino for falling, it's like, well, hey, like we should have recognized that earlier and then warned everybody about the cascading that's about to happen. So I actually think it's a good thing, man. I mean, because I do think there's a risk here. as a man who's on the path of progress to becoming resentful because they're interpreting it as like, hey, you're trying to hold me back, which, by the way, that could be the case. But also, I think it should be like, that should be the last assumption. Or could it be that I was the one who created so much of a seismic shift at the foundation, and I maybe didn't disclose that as much, and maybe just giving myself some grace. Maybe I didn't know, right, like how much of a shift that was going to make. So just being open in dialogue with your partner and being vulnerable as well, and allowing her to be vulnerable too. So I don't know if that resonates at all. Yep, Rob, please.
So that was great, Wes. I was just going to say to Trey, like maybe define what you want, like maybe like understand exactly what you want, because it's hard to understand what you want. And maybe, at least if I'm struggling to understand what you want, maybe she is too.
Yeah, no, I really agree with how y'all are looking at it. I think it's just another opportunity to turn it around and work on how I'm reacting to things instead of putting more thought into why she would be doing something. I think about how I'm reacting to the situation and how I can, adjust to maybe add more seatbelts, like Wes is saying, and the conversations I've been having, I've been trying to emphasize that she is in the equation of all of this, a big part of the equation. And so just reassurance of that, and yeah, like the comment said, leading by example and just not letting it discourage me is kind of my goal.
Yeah, because I think if you got to the origin of it, like if you asked her, like they usually call it like the 5 levels of why, like, hey, what's going on? Why do you feel this way? Why? Once you get to like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th why, eventually what you find out is like, well, I just don't want to lose you. Right? Something like that. And then you're like, oh, damn it. And you feel like hell because like you're getting mad at the person when the core is like, she just wants to be loved. And by the way, it's the same for you and I. I would also say, that this person has invested a decade, right? Which is probably a substantial, percentage of their life. They've invested a decade in with you. Now, it might be your turn to invest more back into her, and by the way, I'm not saying that, oh, this is just a catch-all and everybody should stay together forever. I'm not saying that, but I think in the vast majority of cases, like especially for people who've already been together for a decade, it's like this might just be the next level of growth for you guys. Kaizen, anything to add to this discussion, brother? Oh, you are on mute. You're miming it out right now.
I was going to say, I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's tying into what I've heard women say a lot of times, the whole reassurance. They need to be reassured of where they're at in the relationship. And if you've been with somebody for that long, then you also kind of got to think, what are the things that you're doing that might be driving her crazy that she doesn't point out? And then the one time that she does point out, all of a sudden you're like, I do that all the time. Fuck. If something like that does, like if you have that kind of communication, which you've been with this person for that long, I'm sure it is, while you're cooking dinner or something, is there anything that I'm doing that's like drives you crazy? Just see what happens.
Kaizen, I'm having that. I'm actually very distracted today, gentlemen, because I'm going through exactly what we're talking about right now, where my wife is down in Florida, and I'm reminding her about 2 bills that need to be paid. One is cabinet repair. The other is snow removal. These are 2 things that she requested, and now that I'm texting her about the price, she's freaking out. She's like, we don't have the money. Send me a fucking list. Why are you fucking doing this? And it's like, so I started by journaling, like, how does it make me feel when she swears like that at me? Right? It makes me feel undervalued, unappreciated, shamed, and all that. And now I'm just thinking about, like, what Kaizen just said. Maybe I start with an apology. I didn't mean to trigger you. Even though I want to come at her defensively, like, you never do this, you never do that. This was your idea. I'm just the messenger, right? I'm going to try, like, I didn't mean to trigger you.
I think we do that
I'm trying
a lot.
to help. I want to work on this together. And because the goal here isn't to get even and win this fight, right? The goal for me is to have a good relationship with this person that I'm currently separated with, that I'm currently who tells me all about the dates that she goes on. But so there's context there. But the point is, I want to have a good relationship with this person. And if I have to be the first one to apologize, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, someone was trying to talk me down from my rage there. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, that whole what am I doing first? Because it's easy. That's a really, really deep thing that you can get into. But what is somebody else doing that's pissing you off? What's my version of that? What am I blind to that other people are glaringly obvious, but to me, I'm not picking up on? And then just kind of applying that to if you're in a relationship with somebody, what are you doing that's making you or making them crazy? And then kind of tying into that, just don't get mad. And if you're going to break up in a relationship, don't say like, you were never this or that. Just be cool. Don't get angry. Don't talk shit. Don't be an asshole about it. Just, hey, this isn't going to work out. All right. I wish you all the best. And just keep it like that. Don't go down that negative path, which is very, very, it's like a cookie, a chocolate chip cookie, and you're super hungry. It's easy to just eat it. It's easy to get mad and just be pissed off and say all these fucked up things to people. And then you feel bad. You probably ruined their day. And you're already feeling bad at the relationship is ending versus just keep it calm. That's going to make everything a lot smoother. And then it'll be a lot easier to kind of just move on from there if you're not still holding on to these emotions, this bitterness.
Yeah, totally agreed. Arjuna, you had a final thing to say, I think, buddy.
Yeah, real quick. I wanted to kind of talk on that. Actually, yesterday I just kind of had a breakthrough with my girlfriend in this same way, because it's like we do a lot of work. I mean, I've done a lot of work personally, and I see where my progress is and my emotional, intelligence and blah, blah, blah. And so the course of our relationship, a lot of the stuff we talk about in counseling, what have you, I'm kind of grabbing the bull by the horns and this and that. And of course, I'm never complaining about her. I'm just like, hey, when you show up in these ways, it can be hard in the relationship. But last night she pointed out something about me, and I was so appreciative. And we realized that because so much of the energy and the focus on the problems are with her, that she didn't feel comfortable bringing up anything, or she didn't really feel valid or worthy, because she's like, well, I'm the one bringing all the problems. And I told her last night, I was like, I'm so thankful that you told this thing about me, because that's like, please, anytime you have these issues, please bring them up, because I don't want it to be like, well, you're the one who's doing everything wrong. Like, obviously I'm not the fucking saint. Like, please don't be scared to address these things. So like, I have shit I got to work on too. And it was very, it was very, I tried as hard as I could to instill that in her. Like, if shit's showing up, because like, I don't show up perfectly too. So like, please check me.
Yeah, fair point. Ben, you raised your hand. Come on, brother. What's going on?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, this was something I learned getting sober, is that when you go down paths like these, the problems don't go away. The solutions just become more clear. So it's just, I don't know, something to kind of keep in mind, I thought.
I love when you come on, you drop wisdom and then you get off. I absolutely love it. Final words of wisdom, Rob. What's your final saying here, buddy? And you're on mute too. Apparently we got a bunch of rookies here today. Sorry, guys.
I'm just typing. I don't have my headset. I don't want it to be distracting. But that being said, I don't even know if I've mentioned this before, but it's just every day that I live my life or join this group or do something new. It's like you said, dude, we're so worried about the chain of dominoes, but we're not even starting with the first domino. So I just encourage everybody, man, like if it's to open a book or even to buy a book, just start the process, because you will get something from it.
Yeah, 100%. Ray, final words, my buddy.
I'm about to put these ideas into practice and walk into the blender. So I'll let you know how it goes on our Monday conversation.
Hell yeah. Kaizen, final words, bud, and you are on mute as well.
Nothing. Just everybody go out and kill it. You're enough. You're good enough. Whatever you think is good enough to say. Believe you're enough. Know you're enough. Just by being you is enough. There you go.
Hell yeah. Just real quick, Delco Jim. Oh, Delco Jim's here.
Dude, the OG.
You want to say hi. Sorry, didn't realize that was Delco Jim. Arjuna, final words of wisdom, buddy.
I feel like I spoke everything I could on that. I appreciate y'all. Just want to let you know, last counseling session, we've been applying structure in the relationship, and that was this whole thing is a big part of that. And so I appreciate y'all. And Wes, I appreciate you. I appreciate all the OGs.
Hey, right back at you, brother. Patty P.
Begin again. Always begin again, because you always can.
Love it. Trey?
Yeah, I just really appreciate y'all's input, and think I'm just gonna focus on how I can grow and soak up as much
Thanks, Jimmy.
books and
Appreciate you sharing, by the way, Trey. Nice job sharing.
Yeah. Thanks
Trey.
so much. It's a
Thank you,
pleasure
bro.
having you on, brother.
Love
And
it.
Ben, I don't know if you want to put on the Bane mask before you give your final word.
No, he's rocking American Sniper now. It's all good.
Yeah. Final words of wisdom, Ben. And you're on mute too.
Not much. Just stay on the path, dude. It's a rewarding journey, but it's still tough.
Hell
all I
yeah,
got.
absolutely. Delco Jim, final cameo spot here.
Look at this guy.
DJ, dude, it's so funny because I get messages now of like, hey, was that Delco Jim on the cast? Like, I love that dude. I watch him on YouTube, blah, blah, blah. So congratulations on all the success, man.
Yeah, you're really
So,
driving up our algorithm and our metrics, DJ. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
What's the
dude.
quick update, brother?
Hell yeah, dude. I'm the back page, dude. We're getting there. I appreciate y'all. It's really great that I was able to tune in today. Got a lot of shit going on, so it's really cool to see a bunch of dogs fucking grinding. You know what I mean?
Love you,
yeah,
Delco
man.
Jim.
Yeah, DJ, if you're down for coming on, doing a full episode, we'll put you front and center because you've been on a hell of a journey. For the guys who don't know, DJ, he came on here years ago. He used to tune in from the back, inventory closet of Starbucks.
No, he'd be in the bathroom
barista.
and he'd lock the door, and there'd be a long line of customers trying to get in.
Yeah, and now he's grinding all over the country on comedy podcasts, etc. So congratulations on the success, DJ. It's an honor to fight by your side, brother, and thanks for coming on today.
Literally grinding right now.
Yeah, dude. Guy underneath me right now. It's crazy. I would love to come, fucking do another thing like Tuesday, right?
Monday and Friday.
Monday. That's right.
Exactly, not Tuesday. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, dude, you guys are the best. I'll check in with you guys soon.
Hey, thank you, brother. Love you, buddy. Love all you guys. You guys have an outstanding weekend. Thank you for helping me learn today. Later, dudes.
Thanks, guys.